What happens when Hollywood's most beloved action star walks into what he thinks is a friendly late-night interview, only to discover the host has prepared an ambush that would destroy careers and shatter reputations? What you're about to hear is the most shocking confrontation in late-night television history. A battle between two titans that escalated so quickly and so viciously that security had to be called, and one of the biggest names in entertainment was forcibly removed from the studio. This isn't just another celebrity feud. This is the story of how a calculated attack backfired spectacularly and revealed the true character of everyone involved. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. The green room at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Dwayne Johnson sat comfortably in the leather chair, scrolling through his phone and chatting casually with his publicist about the upcoming interview. He had been on Kimmel's show multiple times over the years, and each appearance had been nothing but laughs, good-natured ribbing, and promotional fun for whatever project he was working on. Tonight was supposed to be no different. Just another stop on the press tour for his latest blockbuster, another chance to showcase the charm and humor that had made him one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. His publicist, Sarah, checked her watch and gathered her things. "You'll do great, as always," she said, giving him an encouraging smile. "Just the usual stuff, right? Movie talk, maybe some jokes about your workout routine, probably something about your daughters." Dwayne nodded, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit jacket. "Should be easy. Jimmy's always been cool with me. We've got good chemistry on camera." A production assistant appeared at the door, clipboard in hand and headset around her neck. "Mr. Johnson, we're ready for you. Jimmy's finishing up his monologue now, so you'll be on in about 3 minutes." "Sounds good," Dwayne replied, standing up and straightening his tie. He had done this dance thousands of times, the familiar rhythm of late-night television, the practiced spontaneity that looked effortless but was really the result of years of experience and natural charisma. As he walked through the backstage corridors toward the stage entrance, he could hear the muffled sound of Jimmy's voice delivering his monologue to the studio audience. The laughter came in waves, the kind of reliable, predictable response that kept these shows running night after night, year after year. Everything felt normal, routine, exactly as it should be. The floor manager gave him the standard briefing as they waited in the wings. "We'll bring you out after the commercial break. Jimmy will do the usual introduction. You'll come out, wave to the crowd, shake hands, sit down. First segment is about 8 minutes, then we'll have another break. Standard stuff." Dwayne nodded along, his mind already shifting into performance mode. He could see Jimmy at his desk, wrapping up a bit about some political nonsense that would be forgotten by tomorrow morning. The audience was engaged, responsive, exactly the kind of crowd that made for good television. "And we're clear," the floor manager announced as the show went to commercial. Jimmy looked over toward the wings and gave Dwayne a wave and a smile that seemed perfectly genuine. Everything appeared to be exactly as it should be. The commercial break felt longer than usual, but that might have just been anticipation. Dwayne ran through the talking points in his head, the anecdotes he would share, the self-deprecating jokes that always landed well with late-night audiences. He had stories about the grueling physical preparation for his latest role, funny moments from set, the usual mix of humble bragging and accessible humor that had made him so successful in these formats. 30 seconds, called the floor manager. Jimmy was back at his desk now, shuffling through his note cards and taking a sip of water. He glanced toward the wings again, and this time his smile seemed different somehow, sharper around the edges. But it happened so quickly that Dwayne wondered if he had imagined it. 10 seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2. "Welcome back to Jimmy Kimmel Live," Jimmy said to the camera, his voice carrying that familiar late-night smoothness that had made him a household name. My next guest is one of the biggest movie stars in the world. Someone you've seen in everything from Fast and Furious to Jumanji to Black Adam. He's here tonight to talk about his new action thriller. Please welcome Dwayne Johnson. The band kicked in with an energetic riff, and Dwayne made his entrance to thunderous applause. The studio audience was on their feet, phones out, capturing the moment as he walked across the stage with that $1 million smile and the easy confidence that had made him a global superstar. He waved to different sections of the crowd, pointing and acknowledging fans, playing to the energy in the room. Jimmy stood up behind his desk, arms outstretched in welcome, and they met in the middle for the traditional handshake and brief embrace that kicked off every guest appearance. "Great to see you, man," Jimmy said into Dwayne's ear as they hugged, but there was something in his tone that didn't quite match his public persona. "Always good to be here," Dwayne replied, stepping back and waving once more to the crowd before taking his seat in the guest chair. Jimmy waited for the applause to die down before launching into his opening. "So Dwayne, thank you for being here. I have to say, you look fantastic as always. Still hitting the gym at 4 in the morning." Every single day, Dwayne laughed. "The iron doesn't lie, Jimmy. It's the most honest relationship in my life." "Now, that's interesting that you mention honesty," Jimmy said, and something in his tone shifted just slightly. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but Dwayne caught it immediately. Years of experience in the entertainment industry had taught him to read rooms and people with precision, and suddenly every instinct he had was telling him that something was off. "Let's talk about your new movie," Jimmy continued, but he wasn't looking at his note cards anymore. Instead, he was staring directly at Dwayne with an intensity that didn't match the casual nature of the conversation. "Action thriller, lots of stunts, lots of explosions. You do most of your own stunts, right?" "I do as much as the insurance companies will let me," Dwayne replied, still maintaining his media-trained composure but now fully alert to the subtle shift in energy. "Safety first, but I like to give the audience something real whenever possible." "Something real," Jimmy repeated, leaning back in his chair. "That's interesting. Because I've been wondering lately about what's real and what's not when it comes to celebrities and their public personas." The studio audience was still engaged, still laughing at what they perceived as playful banter, but Dwayne could feel the conversation taking a turn that wasn't in any pre-interview notes. This wasn't the direction their previous conversations had ever taken, and it definitely wasn't the kind of softball promotional interview he had been expecting. "I think authenticity is important," Dwayne said carefully, his media training kicking in as he tried to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Fans can tell when you're being genuine with them." "Absolutely," Jimmy agreed, but his smile was starting to look more like a smirk. "Fans deserve honesty from their heroes, don't they? They deserve to know who they're really supporting, who they're really putting their money behind when they buy those movie tickets." Now Dwayne was certain that something was wrong. This wasn't typical late-night television banter. This was starting to feel like an interrogation disguised as an interview. He glanced toward the wings where his publicist was standing, and he could see the concern on her face as she watched the conversation unfold. The concern on Sarah's face told Dwayne everything he needed to know. This wasn't going according to any script they had discussed, and whatever Jimmy had planned, it wasn't going to be the friendly promotional interview they had all expected. But Dwayne had been in the entertainment business long enough to know that the show must go on, regardless of what curveballs got thrown your way. "Speaking of supporting," Jimmy continued, his voice taking on an edge that was becoming impossible to ignore. "I think we should talk about some of the people you've supported over the years. Some of the decisions you've made behind the scenes that maybe your fans don't know about." Dwayne felt his jaw tighten slightly, but he kept his composure. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, Jimmy." "Oh, I think you do," Jimmy replied, leaning forward in his chair now, his pretense of casual conversation completely abandoned. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think it's time we had an honest conversation about who Dwayne Johnson really is when the cameras aren't. Rolling! The studio audience was starting to sense that something was different about this interview. The energy in the room had shifted from celebratory to uncomfortable, and you could hear the nervous murmur of people trying to figure out what they were witnessing. Jimmy, I came here tonight to talk about my movie and connect with fans, Dwayne said, his voice still controlled, but with a warning edge creeping in. If you have some kind of personal issue with me, maybe we should discuss it off camera. Personal issue? Jimmy laughed, but there was no humor in it. This isn't personal, Dwayne. This is about accountability. This is about finally calling out someone who has built an entire career on being the good guy while treating people like garbage behind the scenes. Now, the audience was definitely uncomfortable. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity roasting they were used to seeing on late-night television. This was something else entirely, something that felt more like an attack than entertainment. Dwayne's publicist was frantically trying to get the attention of the show's producers, but they seemed just as caught off guard as everyone else. Whatever Jimmy had planned, he had clearly kept it to himself, springing it on everyone at once. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, Dwayne said, starting to rise from his chair. Maybe we should take a break and figure out what's going on here. Sit down, Jimmy said sharply. We're not done talking. The command hung in the air like a challenge, and Dwayne slowly lowered himself back into the chair. But his entire demeanor had changed now. The easygoing movie star persona was gone, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. Anyone who had ever stepped into a wrestling ring with him would have recognized the look. You want to do this here? Dwayne asked, his voice quiet but carrying a threat that everyone in the studio could feel. In front of all these people? On your show? I want to do this wherever it needs to be done, Jimmy shot back. I'm tired of watching you fool everyone with your fake nice guy act while you destroy careers and ruin lives behind the scenes. Someone needs to finally tell the truth about who you really are. And you think that someone is you? Dwayne asked, leaning back in his chair now, his initial surprise giving way to something that looked almost like amusement. You think you're the one who's going to take me down? I think someone needs to, Jimmy replied. I think someone needs to finally expose the real Dwayne Johnson, the one who backstabs his co-stars, who manipulates his way to the top, who steps on anyone who gets in his way. The accusations were serious, the kind of career-ending allegations that could destroy someone's reputation permanently. But as Jimmy continued his attack, something interesting was happening. Instead of looking defensive or worried, Dwayne was starting to look almost relaxed, like a predator that had just realized his opponent was much weaker than expected. Those are some pretty serious charges, Jimmy, Dwayne said calmly. I hope you have some evidence to back them up. Oh, I have evidence, Jimmy replied, reaching for a folder that had been sitting on his desk. I have stories from people who worked with you, people who trusted you, people whose careers you ended because they dared to cross you. Let's hear them, Dwayne said, settling back in his chair like he was getting comfortable for a long conversation. I'm fascinated to know what kind of evidence you think you have. Jimmy opened the folder and pulled out several pieces of paper. Let's start with your time on the Fast and Furious franchise. Multiple sources tell me that you deliberately sabotaged Vin Diesel's scenes, that you used your producer credit to cut his dialogue, that you made his life so miserable on set that he almost quit the franchise entirely. Dwayne actually laughed. At that, a genuine sound of amusement that caught Jimmy off guard. Is that what Vin told you? That I sabotaged him? Are you denying it? I'm asking if that's really the story you want to go with, Dwayne replied. Because if we're going to talk about what really happened on those sets, If we're going to talk about professionalism and treating people with respect, then maybe we should talk about someone showing up hours late every day, someone throwing tantrums when they didn't get their way, someone who made everyone else's job harder because they couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Jimmy's confidence was starting to waver. This wasn't going the way he had planned. You're deflecting. I'm responding to your accusations with facts, Dwayne said, his voice getting stronger now. You want to talk about sabotage? Let's talk about someone who held up production for weeks because they refused to do their job. Let's talk about someone who cost the entire crew overtime and holiday pay because they couldn't be bothered to show up on time. That's not what happened, Jimmy said, but he was clearly losing control of the narrative he had tried to create. Isn't it? Dwayne asked. Because I have about 200 crew members who would tell you a very different story. I have directors and producers who would be happy to explain exactly what happened on those sets and who was responsible for the problems. The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this confrontation unfold with the kind of fascination that comes from witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't entertainment anymore, this was a real fight happening in real time. What about your other co-stars? Jimmy pressed, clearly determined to stick to his planned attack despite how badly it was going. What about the people who say you're impossible to work with, that you demand top billing and the best trailers and special treatment that other actors don't get? You mean the treatment that comes with being the #1 box office draw in the world? Dwayne asked. The treatment that comes with carrying movies that make hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah, Jimmy, when you're responsible for that kind of success, you do get treated differently. That's how business works. It's about respect, Jimmy insisted. It's about treating people as equals. Respect? Dwayne repeated. And now his voice was getting dangerously quiet. You want to talk about respect? Let's talk about respect, Jimmy. Let's talk about inviting someone to your show under false pretenses. Let's talk about ambushing a guest who came here in good faith. Let's talk about trying to destroy someone's reputation on national television without giving them a chance to defend themselves. Jimmy was starting to look uncomfortable now, realizing that his carefully planned attack was backfiring spectacularly. I'm just trying to get to the truth. No, you're not, Dwayne said, standing up from his chair now, his full presence dominating the stage. You're trying to tear someone down because you think it will make good television. You're trying to create drama where none exists because you think it will get you ratings. And you're doing it in the most cowardly way possible. The word cowardly hung in the air like a physical blow. Jimmy's face flushed red, and you could see the exact moment when whatever professionalism he had left completely evaporated. This wasn't going according to his plan at all, and now he was facing the humiliation of being outmaneuvered by the very person he had tried to ambush. Cowardly? Jimmy snapped, his voice rising for the first time. I'm the one with the courage to finally say what everyone in Hollywood is thinking. I'm the one willing to call you out for who you really are. Everyone in Hollywood? Dwayne asked, taking a step closer to Jimmy's desk. Is that what you think? You think everyone in Hollywood is sitting around talking about how terrible I am? Because I've got news for you, Jimmy. The only person who seems to have a problem with me is you. That's not true, Jimmy said, but his voice was starting to crack under the pressure. I have sources. I have people who came to me with stories. Sources, Dwayne repeated mockingly. Anonymous sources who are too afraid to put their names behind their accusations. Real credible journalism there, Jimmy. Really holding yourself to the highest standards. The studio audience was completely transfixed now. Many of them had their phones out, recording what they sensed was television history in the making. This wasn't just a celebrity feud anymore. This was a complete meltdown, happening in real time. You want names? Jimmy shouted, abandoning any pretense of professional composure. Fine, I'll give you names. Vin Diesel thinks you're a narcissistic control freak. Tyrese Gibson says you're a backstabbing politician. Half the people who worked on Hobbs and Shaw said you made their lives miserable. And did any of them say that to my face? Dwayne asked, his voice deadly calm in contrast to Jimmy's growing hysteria. Or did they all run to you like children tattling to their teacher? Because if they have problems with me, they know where to find me. They have my number. They have my email. They know my representatives. But instead of being adults and having a conversation, they decided to whisper in the ear of a talk show host who's desperate for ratings. This isn't about ratings, Jimmy protested, but everyone could hear how hollow the words sounded. Isn't it? Dwayne asked. Because your show has been losing viewers for months, hasn't it, Jimmy? Your ratings have been sliding. The network executives have been asking questions, and you thought maybe a little manufactured controversy might get people talking again. The accuracy of that assessment was written all over Jimmy's face. His show had indeed been struggling, and the pressure from network executives had been mounting. But hearing it laid out so bluntly in front of a live studio audience was clearly more than he could handle. You don't know what you're talking about, Jimmy said weakly. Don't I? Dwayne asked. Because it seems to me like you invited me here tonight with one goal in mind. You wanted to create a viral moment, something that would get people talking, something that would make your show relevant again. And you figured the best way to do that was to attack someone who couldn't fight back because they were trapped in your studio, on your show, with your audience. You're not trapped, Jimmy said. You can leave anytime you want. You're right, Dwayne said, straightening his jacket. I can leave. And I am leaving. Because I don't have to sit here and listen to some desperate television host try to destroy my reputation for his own benefit. But as Dwayne started to walk toward the exit, Jimmy made the biggest mistake of the entire evening. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was wounded pride, or maybe it was just the final collapse of whatever judgment he had left. But he decided to make one last attempt to salvage his failed ambush. Walk away then, Jimmy called after him. Run. Away like you always do when things get tough. Just like you ran away from WWE when they wouldn't make you the top guy. Just like you ran away from football when you couldn't cut it in the pros. Just like you run away from every real challenge in your life. Dwayne stopped walking. For a moment, the entire studio was silent, except for the hum of the cameras and the distant sound of traffic outside. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned, around, and walked back toward Jimmy's desk. What did you just say? Dwayne asked, his voice so quiet that the audience had to strain to hear him. Jimmy realized he had crossed a line, but it was too late to take it back now. I said you run away from challenges. No, Dwayne said, now standing directly in front of Jimmy's desk. You said I ran away from WWE and football. You want to talk about those things? Let's talk about them. Dwayne, maybe we should. One of the producers tried to interject from off stage, but both men ignored him completely. I didn't run away from WWE, Dwayne said, his voice getting stronger with each word. I conquered WWE. I became the biggest star they ever had, and when I was ready to move on to bigger things, I did. And football? I was cut from the team because I wasn't good enough, and instead of making excuses or blaming other people, I found something I was good at and became the best in the world at it. That's not how I heard it, Jimmy said, but his voice was shaking now. I don't care how you heard it, Dwayne replied. I care about what actually happened. And what actually happened is that I worked harder than anyone else. I treated people with respect, and I earned everything I got. While you, apparently, have been sitting here for years, nursing some kind of imaginary grudge, because your career peaked 20 years ago. And you can't accept that some people are just better than you. The brutality of that assessment left Jimmy speechless for a moment. When he finally found his voice again, it was to make the worst decision of his entire career. Get out, Jimmy said, pointing toward the exit. Get out of my studio." "Your studio?" Dwayne laughed. "This isn't your studio, Jimmy. You're just renting space here. And in about 6 months, when your ratings are so bad that they can't justify keeping you around anymore, someone else will be sitting at that desk, someone who actually knows how to treat their guests with respect." "Security!" Jimmy yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "Get him out of here!" Two security guards appeared from the wings, looking extremely uncomfortable about the situation they had been thrust into. They approached Dwayne hesitantly, clearly not wanting to physically confront someone who could probably handle both of them without breaking a sweat. "It's okay," Dwayne said to them, his voice returning to its normal, controlled tone. "I'm leaving." He turned to address the studio audience directly, many of whom were still recording everything with their phones. "I apologize that you all had to witness this," he said. "You came here tonight expecting to be entertained, and instead you got to see what happens when someone lets their ego and desperation override their professionalism." Then he turned back to Jimmy one final time. "And Jimmy, next time you want to ambush someone, make sure you're actually capable of handling the fight you're starting." With that, Dwayne walked off the stage, leaving Jimmy sitting alone at his desk, his face red with embarrassment and his career effectively over. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, not sure whether to applaud or simply try to process what they had just witnessed. The cameras kept rolling for another few seconds before someone finally had the presence of mind to cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Within hours, clips of the confrontation would be all over social media, dissected and analyzed by millions of people around the world. Jimmy had gotten his viral moment, but not at all the way he had planned. Instead of exposing Dwayne Johnson as a fraud, he had exposed himself as exactly the kind of desperate, unprofessional host that late-night television didn't need. The show would limp on for a few more months, but everyone knew it was over. The most shocking part wasn't the confrontation itself, but how completely Jimmy had misread the situation. He had thought he was setting a trap for Dwayne, but instead he had walked into one himself. He had underestimated his opponent in every possible way, and by the time he realized his mistake, it was far too late to recover. So what do you think really motivated Jimmy's attack? Was it jealousy, desperation for ratings, or something else? Entirely. Subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments below, because this story reveals something important about the entertainment industry and the people who think they can tear others down to build themselves up.